what I do is when I send a reminder about the sessions, I send you the recording from the previous sessions. So some of you may have received a reminder for today's session and also a link to there is a playlist in YouTube with several of the recordings. ICF, the local chapter is not recording or keeping track of the cafes because they have so many different activities for these activities I'm not doing it. So that's the reason why I am doing it myself. But you will have access to previous sessions. And in this cafe, our goal is to discuss leadership and coaching. How we can support leaders to be more coach-like, how we can support leaders to develop coaching skills. This is an open space, so we have people attending here who are coaches, leaders. For the people that I am seeing right now that are with the camera on, I don't know if there are many who may not be coaches, but I think most people who are here today are coaches. And I want to suggest people, if you can, sometimes you may not be able to, but if you're able to turn on your camera, would be great, because the concept of these cafes is to, when we do it in person, and I have been attending here in the cafe in Long Beach, what we do is we share experiences. So it's a dialogue, it's a conversation, it's not a class. So I'm not planning today to do a lecture, but to create a space for people to share experiences around different topics related to coaching and leadership. And what we do is we follow my book, Lead with a Coaching Mindset. You don't need to buy the book to participate, but if you want to, I recommend that you get it, because what we cover in the program are the different chapters of the book. So there are 10 chapters. Every month we cover a different chapter. January was chapter 1, February chapter 2, March chapter 3. So in the future, you know what chapter based on the month is the number of the chapter. And chapter 2 is about ethical leadership and ethical maturity. How many of you have heard the idea of ethical maturity? Deborah, anybody else? Fred is not raising his hand, but he heard about that in the supervision training, didn't you? Because in part of supervision, and I do believe that supervision is very important, and people who know me, you have heard me talking about this, and that's the reason why I help in the local chapter to create the SIG, the Special Interest Group for on Coaching Supervision, and that's available for everybody who wants to go and participate and receive free group supervision, and you get CCs for that too. So you may want to take advantage of that. One of the functions of the supervisor is to look at ethical dilemmas and look at ethical issues that we may have working with our clients. But when we talk about ethical maturity, what does it sound to you? Like Deborah, what sounds when you hear ethical maturity? What is your understanding for you? Yeah, you're looking to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I think when, the word maturity for me connotes growth, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a developmental process where when one is mature, there's a confidence with which one proceeds. So for me, as a coach, it's how do I look at myself? How do I try to incorporate how others see me and experience me as a coach? And in many ways, for me, it's the constant questioning of, um, am I proceeding in ways that are kind, compassionate, and ethical in the work that I do with my clientele?
Great, thank you. Thank you for that, Deborah. Have all of the different elements. And when sometimes we think about wisdom, which is our maturity related to our experience and wisdom. And the idea is that the more experience we have as coaches, or as mentor coaches, or as team coaches, supervisors, we have different practices here represented. The idea that we develop some maturity based on the experience. So when we are meeting some challenges, we have seen that before. So it's not our first time. And I know here we have people with a lot of experience as coaches. And the first time that you have a challenge was different than when you had it for second or third time. And we feel more confident about dealing with some of these challenges. And the idea is that we evolve, and we're all evolving in our ability to make decisions. because ethical maturity and ethical coaching and ethical leadership is about decision making. It's how we make decisions. And it's interesting because many times when people hear about ethics, they say, oh, this is boring. Like particularly in coaching, like there is a class about ethics. People say, oh, this is like the boring class. And it's so important to be able to understand that we are all the time making choices. And sometimes these choices may not be ethical, even though we are not aware of that. So that's the reason we're talking about supervision. Supervision can help us in conversations to identify blind spots and sometimes maybe an ethical issue we are not seeing. So that makes very interesting for me. I am very interested in the topic of ethics because and the difference between morality and ethics, because sometimes they are confused. Morality is about what society or a group of people in one culture agree that is good and what is bad, what is acceptable and not acceptable. So it's a community shared belief system. Ethics is individual. Ethics are my decisions, is what I am doing based on that morality, how I apply my own decision in saying things or doing things that will impact others. That's the reason why our associations have ethics codes that guide our practices. And that's the reason why it's so important to know what are these codes so we are aware of what can be we have to take into consideration when working with our clients and what to do when we have that what we call ethical dilemmas. We have a dilemma, something happened. What do we do? Okay, so this is what we're going to be talking today about ethical dilemmas. We have this challenge, and what do we do? And do you know what? Maybe you didn't have the challenge yet, but that may come up later. And today, with AI, the challenges are different than what were before. So, how are we prepared to deal with AI, integrating AI to our work and making ethical decisions around AI? Barry,
Can you hear me okay?
we can hear you now. Yeah, yes,
Okay.
much better.
So, it's interesting, the word ethical and maturity. I've never used them together in the same sandwich. Because when I think of ethical, I think of maturity. I'm going to turn off my thing. When I think of
Ah, yes.
ethical, I think of maturity. And when I think maturity, I think of ethical. It's like the opposite of mutually exclusive. Like
Mhm.
it's like it's an interesting, it's like an inquiry I'm sitting with. I'm going, I've never thought of that. Because like if it's ethical, in my mind I think it's mature. If it's mature, you'd be ethical, but it's really a fascinating way of thinking about it. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, this concept, this distinction has been developed by Carroll, and he has a book called Ethical Maturity in the Helping Professions. So
And who's
how
the
you
who, who's the author again?
Carroll,
Last name of
Gigi,
Carol?
yeah, Gigi, will you help me because you know this what I'm talking about to here.
Really?
So there is a book about this concept. So the idea with ethical maturity, according to Carroll, he developed a model
Great.
around five elements. And these are the elements. One element, and then with this, I'm going to send you to small groups to have conversations around this. This is the topic today is ethical maturity, how we support leaders to be ethical when they are not being ethical, or some of other dilemmas that we have working with leaders around ethical issues. But these are the five elements of ethical maturity following Carol, and also you can find more in my book, but also you can go to his book that is a source. And I use that to train supervisors. That's the reason why I was telling Fred about it, but Gigi, Gerardo, they are also graduates from my supervision training. So one first element is mindfulness. It's being realizing, being aware that there is an ethical issue, because sometimes we are not even aware that there is an ethical issue. So how we are paying attention to our behaviors and how that is they're impacting others, and how to what extent we are or we are not following ethical guidelines, for example, based by associations. So the first element is having that being one element of this ethical maturity is your mindfulness, is your how aware or not you are about how ethical are you being or not being. The second part is about how you make decisions. And it's about paying attention that we most of the time make rational decisions. But sometimes the rational decisions may not be fair or may not be there may not be justice in that, even though it's rational and logic, it may not be fair. So we also need to use our emotions, our compassion, our intuition. So when we make ethical decisions, how we integrate in decision making not only logic and reasoning, but also emotions, intuition, experiences, compassion. So how we incorporate all of these elements in decision making. The other piece is about once that you are aware of the things, you're making the decision. The third element is the implementation. Because you make a lot of decisions in your mind, but that doesn't mean that you take action. And that's another element is once that you have made your mind, you make the decision is that you act accordingly. Because many times people make decisions, but they don't do anything about it. They are not taking the action that they consider appropriate to be ethical. Now, the fourth one is an interesting one that is about defending your implementation, defending what you have done once you have done that decision. I remember once when I was a global president, and Gerardo, that what I'm going to share may sound familiar to you. There was a person that was kind of a friend of us, a friend of both of us, that we need to expel from the organization. And he was a friend, and he did something that was inappropriate, and it's not very common over the. I have been involved with ICF for 20 years. It's very rare that people are expelled. They really had to do something important to really be expelled from the organization. And I was in the board, and I was a friend of his, and the board decided to expel him, and I had to defend that decision. It's like and sometimes it's not public, sometimes people decide to share, but ICF cannot share that information. So every time that somebody is expelled, different than other association that is public, this is not public to protect the person, whatever. So I had to defend that, and it was very difficult, it was very challenging. But once that we are sure that what we are doing is the right thing, even though it may be very uncomfortable, we need to defend our position and be in peace with that. What is not easy. Okay, how we can be in peace with the decisions that we make that are challenging, that are difficult. And the last one is about learning from the process. It's okay, what can we learn from that and how we can integrate that to our life? How we can use this learning experience for our life and how we can use that next time that we have the next challenge. So paying attention to these five elements, I'm going to repeat them. It's not about memorizing, but it's about understanding that in the ethical maturity, there is a process that includes mindfulness, being aware, include decision making and using different elements for that decision, include implementing your decisions, include defending your decisions and being at peace with it, and finally, growing and learning and integrating the experience in your life. So these are the five elements of ethical maturity. So based on your personal experiences, how that relates to you, how that resonates with you, with your work as a coach, with your work with leaders that you work coaching them. And so we are going to go to small groups. We are going to have a chance to discuss. And let's get one person to take notes for everybody. So we will do that for 15 minutes. That will give us time to come back and have a big group conversation. And I know that some people here may or may not be able to participate. I see already some people leaving when people have to go to small groups. Some people disappear, what is normal because sometimes people are not able to do that. But you may still not be able to speak and turn your camera, but you may still all may be able to participate in the chat box or in another way. Okay, so have fun. I will see you in 15 minutes. I will give you a couple of minutes extra. Recording. Okay, welcome back. Do you have a good conversation? This is the goal of this space, is to have good conversations with your colleagues. My role here is to facilitate that space. So we have three rooms. Let's start with the room we have Barry, Fred, Gerardo, and Marilyn. Who would like to share some of your exchange, your conversation?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Great conversation, and centered on just using all of our coaching experiences as learning opportunities, and as things come up, right from a ethical question, how do we process it? How do we learn from that? Also being sure we're grounded in our own ethics and bring a sensitivity of cultural humility and understanding that
Mm,
what might
yeah,
be um, our ethical lens may be different than somebody else's based on
yeah.
how we're brought up or the culture that whatever's acceptable in their culture. And being able to give enough space for the client to kind of play in that sandbox. Um, and one thing that kind of challenged us is if our ethical lens differs than the client's ethical lens, and they're doing something, demonstrating some behavior that might rub us in wrong, but it's their perspective and it's their lens. So what's our obligation, assuming they're not harming themselves or others? What's our obligation as a coach to call that out and even explore it if it's not an issue they want to explore?
Mm. That's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do we deal? Because that goes beyond, that goes about cultural issues, cultural diversity, and what are gray and what is definitely not gray. Because there are things like I remember when I moved to the United States, I had been living in LA for 36 years, a long time, even though I still have a strong accent, but I've been here for a while. And I remember one of the things that caught my attention was that you don't get to see that as often as anymore, but before it was more often that you see these places where you get the newspaper, that you put one coin and you open and you get the newspaper. We have that in the United States. There still are some places, but not as much as like we're talking 36 years ago. And I was blown away that people would go and put one coin and take only one newsletter. Because from where I come from, I don't know, Gerardo is still there. Gerardo is from Argentina too. Even he lives in Uruguay. That doesn't happen. The first person will take everything. And you can see, like I say that with humor, but there are differences in culture and differences in relating to different things. Even driving. When I go to Buenos Aires, I don't drive. I don't drive. In Los Angeles, I always drive, but it's a very different way to relate to driving, to the people around you, to the people walking on the streets. It's like a different, as Fred, you were saying, a different way of relating to reality,
Mm.
how you are thinking, how you are interpreting what's happening now. The question that you're bringing is a good question because we, in coaching, in supervision, in mentor coaching, our position following the ICF framework is that we are not coming from a place of certainty. We're coming from a place of partnering and inquiring together. So here that can be a question, cannot be a judgment, can be a question to explore. And I remember having this conversation with Peter Hawkins because Peter Hawkins had been doing a lot of work around environmental issues and climate change and bringing awareness of the world and what leaders can do around that. And leaders working with coaches have the advantage to have somebody who can ask them questions that they may not ask them, anybody else. But I was wondering, is our job, is our responsibility to bring this issue to coaching? This is our agenda as a coach, may not be the agenda of the client. And Peter Hawking answered, are your clients breathing? Yes, they breathe. Well, if they are breathing, climate change is an issue no matter what, you know. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that the clients want to go there and work on that. That's something different. But bringing the issue to the conversation, I do believe it's important. So, Fred, in this kind of situation, when we have a question, I always think The best approach is share your question to your clients as a supervisor, as a coach. As a mentor coach is a little bit different because as a mentor coach, you're supposed to be an expert on ICF core competencies and you are supposed to be providing feedback based on that framework. So in mentor coaching is more directive, but in coaching and in supervision is more a conversation and a dialogue.
Yep.
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Fred. What about in the group with Alina, Deborah, Gigi, and Oliana?
Yeah, our group, we kind of started off with one of our participants sharing the coaching dilemma that she is in at the moment. It was more about coming to the fact that the coachee's not really doesn't want to be coached, and yet it's still an expectation from the sponsor to do that, to coach the client, the coachee. And this kind of triggered some memories of the other coaches that they came up to some coaching dilemmas where ethical issues kind of came about confidentiality and also about being not necessarily directive, but manipulative to manipulate the coachee into doing something that the sponsor wants. So that was became a rich conversation of sharing those situations. So that was our group.
Very interesting. And that brings us the issue, the element number one from the model of ethical maturity is about awareness, is being aware of the dynamics of the system we are participating. Because sometimes the coach may manipulate the client to do what the sponsor wants. And if you look at visually like a triangle, and in the triangle, you have the coach, the client, and HR or the leader or somebody else who is a sponsor. In this triangle, a lot happened. So it can be that the sponsor is trying to manipulate you to do something with the leader. But also can be the leader who is manipulating you to get the organization to do something different for them. Have you seen that before? And that's the reason why when we're in an organization and we work with different people, we have to be careful with these triangles because they can be overlapped and can be tricky. Particularly, for example, if you're working with a person and the leader and the boss. So how you keep things clean. It's like you can be good about keeping confidentiality, but the other two are thinking, okay, how they are going to be using this information when they are working with the other person. It's an element to pay attention to keep track of.
So what do we do in a situation like that?
Which one? Okay, first of all, we need to be aware of that. And second, I always say we all need to work with a supervisor. Okay, like I have been a master coach for since 2010, many years, and I still need my supervisor because I still have questions and I still have blind spots. So it doesn't matter how much experience we have. It's important to work with somebody who helps us to see what we are not seeing. My experience is transparency is the most important piece that we can do. So if we're aware of something happening, we can bring into conversation in a way that is respectful, in a way that is not accusatory, but in a way that brings light. So you may share your experience. This is what I am experiencing. If there's a possibility that some of this is happening. Or maybe sometimes I use humor, like, and I will make like in a joke, I would say, if you have a relationship and you have trust, I may just joke with my client and say, oh, you wanted me to do your dirty job. You wanted me to, to go to talk to HR. Or the other way around. You can say with HR, okay, you wanted me to do, and that's happening a lot, that leaders can hire coaches. So they do the dirty job and they get rid of the people that they don't want to work with. So they want somebody else to show them how ineffective they are. And many times they are the ones who need the coaching to start with. Have you seen that? So how do you do with all of these different challenges? Is by bringing it to conversation in ways that people can take it. Because if you do it in a forceful way or in the right timing, then you are the one who is guilty. So the organization suddenly, all of the problems of the organization are because of you, because of the coach. The coach is the one to be blamed for whatever is happening because didn't coach effectively the leader. Can you see? That's complexity. So I think that by bringing it to conversation, having conversation, clarifying expectations, helping people to bring awareness to what they may not be seeing, these are all different ways that we can navigate these challenging conversations. All of these ethical conversations are challenging. Why? Because many times are not comfortable. And sometimes people say something or did something, and it was not their intention to produce, was an intentionally that they have done something that was not effective or appropriate. So the idea, the goal, ideally, is for people to own it. The ideally is for people to say, yes, I did that, I say that, I apologize. That was not my intention. Ideally, that sometimes does not happen. It will depend also the ethical maturity and the maturity of the people involved. How does it sound? Anything else that people want to add to this? Anything else that you can think of that you may do in these situations? Yes, Alina.
Just my experience. Sometimes when I have to coach, one person who has potentially a conflict with somebody else from the organization, I partner with someone just to make sure that I'm coaching this person and my co-coach coaches this person. And then we have like group or a team or whatever, because for me, this is something that can bring that transparency. And just to make sure that the one person is open with one coach and the
Yeah.
second person can be fully open and engage with the other coach. And then just to have those three-way or whatever, team or
Yeah.
group, because from my experience, this is something that can, bring that stress away, at least in the beginning. And then we'll see how it goes. Well, it depends.
That is my preference too. Now, this is personal. Different coaches have different approaches. My personal approach, my preference is to keep it clean. When you keep it clean, you don't work with people who have challenges with each other. You don't work with the person and the boss. Now, or when you are doing team coaching, you coach the team and maybe the leader, but you don't coach members of the team. That is my preference. Now, there are some coaches who may tell you, I see the value of coaching different people because I do have the context, I understand what's going on, and I can be more effective in working with them. So that can be another argument about this. That I don't agree, but this is what they may say, and it may work for some people. Can you see this? There are choices and possibilities. Now, and particularly when there are these kind of dynamics in organizations, we have to be careful. We have to be aware and we have to do a good job. And this is my experience that coaches many times are not as effective at assessing and analyzing before they start working with a client. We are so eager, okay, we have a new client that, okay, let's do it without stopping and being sure, okay, is this client ready for coaching? Is the organization ready for coaching? So we need to pay attention to this. And this can be, I like to visualize it like red flags. In English, there is this expression red flags. We don't have that in Spanish. So we don't have it in Spanish. The way that I look is somebody with a red flag doing this to me. So I visualize that. Somebody with a red flag moving the flag, telling me, okay, I don't want to go there. You have to pay attention to your intuition, to your experience. Gigi.
Yeah, Damien, you kind of made me think of a situation we have because I'm an internal coach. And one of my coaches is coaching somebody, but the more they coach, because this coach sits in HR, but he's not HR as a coach, but as a coach just in our organization. Now he says, well, the more I'm coaching this person and I'm hearing something from being in HR, the more I know this person. So for me, what you said about being clean, I'm like, oh, after that relationship, if this coachee wants more, I kind of don't want you to be matched with that person because I feel you might not be as non-judgmental as you coach.
Yeah, that requires for the HR person to be really. It's very tricky because
It
he's probably
is.
probably he's learning more than what he wants to know. In that, when you work as an internal coach,
Yes.
internal coaches have to deal with that. And that's the reason why supervision is important. So Gigi, be sure that you are engaged,
Yes. Yes.
supporting.
But But that's
But
the thing, it's the clean
yeah,
coaching.
yeah. And so you, and something is telling you it's not good idea to continue working. Probably you're right. And probably you don't have all of the pieces, but you have your intuition. So this is what I like to remind people that sometimes we do not pay attention to our intuition because we do not have all of the information. But do you know what? This is what separates us from AI these days. It's our intuition. Because many these days we have less and less information, and we need to make the decision with less and less information that is complex, that is ambiguous. So these days making decisions is very challenging, and many times we need to trust our intuition. Barry?
I was just going to briefly say, and I think we have one more round, and that is
Yeah.
uh, eh, when the coach has a lot of knowledge of either they have subject matter expert on something, that's when that's when the coach needs to really go, okay, even though I have this expertise, I'm putting in my coaching hat. It's a really
That's a
tough
good one. That's it.
combination.
And do you know, sometimes it's easier to give advice if you're an expert than biting your tongue and holding the space. I think holding the space for people to think is much more challenging and difficult than sharing your wisdom and your
Particularly if you
experience.
have a lot of knowledge of the thing they're talking about.
Susan, in your group, you want to share what we talked with Victoria and somebody else who left? What was your last?
I think it
And with
was
that, we're going to close.
Christina.
Christina.
Well, she works in immigration in Canada. And so we did wind up talking about the current state of things in the United States, but did tie it back to your question. And I think one of the things we came up with is if an organization has, I coach leaders in organizations. If an organization has a culture that supports people speaking up and standing up and saying, hey, let's do the right thing, let's be ethical, then more people feel safer to speak up and be ethical. If it's a work culture that allows unethical behavior or bad behavior, then people who want to do the right thing or want to see the right thing happen, they will often stay quiet because they're afraid of losing their job, or they'll retaliation. They're afraid of speaking up. So it's kind of like, will the culture support this ethical behavior, or does it support not ethical behavior?
Excellent point. And Susan, this is the point in my book. This is exactly what I write in my chapter
You're
about
welcome.
leaders, how leaders who create these cultures, Susan, who create this environment where there is ethical behavior? The leaders. So if the leaders are ethical, they create an ethical environment. If the leaders are not, they don't. So they are role models and they are responsible. So I do believe we as coaches can bring some questions and challenge leaders we are working with to invite them to look at that, to look at the mirror and see to what extent they are creating the environment that they want to create. Because that can be also my experience working with some leaders is that they have an intention, but the behaviors are not aligned to their intentions. And even though they have great intention, the behaviors, the action, what they say is not creating this kind of environment that they in their heads are trying to create.
And one more thing I want to add, it just from my experience, when I've had a coachee, a leader who has done some bad behavior, and then they learn that it is bad and the kind of impact it has, and that it's not really normal and they shouldn't keep doing it, and they want to make the change, then I often have to get to work on the people around them to give that leader space to become something new and different, so that they don't only see them as the bad actor that they were before. It can be really hard to establish trust again in those relationships. We've made it happen, but it can be difficult. So I'm the one who put in the chat that I have an 8-page contract where I lay out because I've learned over time by making all these mistakes and having all these surprises. Once you're in the coaching engagement, it's like, okay, these are the things I require, and I'm transparent up front. for us to have success. So that kind of prevents the HR person trying to manipulate me or whatever.
Great points. And I have all of the competencies are related to each other. Like ethics is related to trust. So in 2 months, our chapter 4 is about trust. And we're going to be focusing on that and going deeper because if you are not ethical, there is not going to be trust. If there is no trust, you cannot coach because it's required. You trust each other to be able to work together. So before we go, I want to share a couple of links. There is an activity I am organizing tomorrow. Is free, and it's a colleague of mine who's coming up with a model about people who are interested in emotional intelligence. It's called responsibility, emotional responsibility. And I went to his presentation and I loved it. And I thought, oh, this is great. Let's bring my community to benefit from this presentation. So if you can make it, it's tomorrow, Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's free and it's going to be great. So if you can make it, join us.
Who's the colleague?
It's called emotional responsibility. It's a model that they developed about having conversations in coaching with leaders using needs and emotions. So it's a practice. It's like a interesting structure and exercise. And I did it and I participated and I loved it. So I said, okay, let's come to talk to the graduates from my programs, but I want to open it to anybody who wants to come. So take advantage. There is a link there, it's free, and you can benefit tomorrow from 3 to 4. Everybody else, I hope to see you next month. Next month in our session virtually. We meet always the third Wednesday of the month or in person for the local people. Okay? Looking forward, Alina, to working with you in the panel. That will be fun.
Likewise. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us.